Hello, my friend. You are tuned in to a brand new episode of Tide Pod, and today I'm going to say something that your mama may have said to you while you were growing up. Honesty is the best policy. Now, within reason, that advice has been relatively true in most of our adult lives. Like, we need to have tact. However, we have been shown time and time again that honesty, authenticity, open communication, trust are all really, really critical characteristics to help us establish healthy professional relationships. And healthy professional relationships are what? They are paramount to our company's ability to retain top talent, have a healthy team culture, and ultimately just operate at peak performance. And yet, as with anything, even though we know the benefits, we know the positives of being honest and having that open line of communication, the reality is that doesn't always happen. So today, I want to talk to you about one of the largest trends that we see when honesty is not something that is really thriving in your team culture and what those consequences will look like for your company. Like, this is one of those episodes where I'm breaking down the nitty-gritty of the risks of what not having this is going to do over time within your team. So go ahead, get cozy, because I'm going to hit you with the truth today. Let's get into it. Hello, my friend. It's Tiana Tai, Team Dynamics Consultant and trained industrial organizational psychologist, helping you to become a better leader than your last boss. And right now, you are tuning into the go-to podcast for entrepreneurs building and leading teams. Hiring, onboarding, management, or maybe you just want some general advice about building your business. Well, let me assure you, you are in the right place. So go ahead, crack open a fresh notebook because you are listening to Tide Pod. I've got to take just a quick second to ask you for a serious bit of support. Tide Pod would not be possible without your reviews, your comments, and just all of the positive feedback that we've been receiving so far. So if you haven't already, please go on, hit subscribe to make sure you're not missing out on any of this good and free content, and also be sure to leave a review. You may think that I'm not looking at them, but I swear to you, my friend, I read every single review, and it just makes my heart so happy. So if you haven't already done so, hit pause, leave a review, and then let's get back to the goodness. Okay, so this may actually surprise you, but in today's current marketplace, in today's professional environment, there is one particular, very large trend that we are starting to see that is a direct consequence of not having that honesty, having that open path of communication in remote jobs, okay? So this is for my people who do not have a in-person team working for them full-time, but perhaps have some sort of amalgamation of part-time contractors, maybe a couple of full-time people, a couple of people who are interdispersed across the world, right? So that's who we're talking to today because this is the trend that we are seeing. And it is having more than one job without letting people know that they have more than one job. Okay, let's get into it. So there's actually a phrase for this, and it is called overemployment. Yep, overemployed. Who knew that was a thing? Well, we did, because we've been seeing it happen for some time. So basically, the consequence of being an online business, but not having that open and honest communication is attracting team members who work for you, 40 hours a week, but then pick up a second, third, or even fourth gig working 10 hours here, 20 hours there, 15 hours there, so on and so forth. And that's why we call them overemployed. Now, let me be 110% clear here. If you have a contractor on your team who is working part-time and they have additional clients, that is not what we are talking about here. Although a contractor can be quote-unquote overemployed, this conversation is important and applies to you whether you have contractors, employees, or a combination of both. Overemployment is really referring to when someone takes on more than realistic time will allow them to do, because when you work virtually, you are able to quote unquote multitask or even pad hours to make it appear as if you are doing work that may actually not be getting done, or if you are really just stretching yourself too thin, and as a consequence, the work performance begins to slip. So again, this is more about people who are taking on way too much, but they are also not telling you that that is what they have done. So you may have a contractor on your team that has signed up to work for you, 20 hours a week, 25 hours a week. But on top of that, unbeknownst to you, they may already be a full-time team member on someone else's team, which means that they have decided that they have the capacity to work 60 or 65 hours a week technically. Now, whether or not that is actually happening is up for debate, and that's kind of the consequence of that. That's what we're going to get into today. So again, really the main caveat here is taking on way too much for any normal human being to handle, as well as not telling you about it proactively, not keeping you in the loop around what they are taking on and what their genuine true capacity looks like. So I hope I did that description justice, because this is one of those kind of like gray area things where, especially if it's a contractor, not even a full-time employee within your company, there is a lot of gray area here around like what is allowed and what is not allowed, right? We can't tell our contractors what other contracts they are and are not allowed to take. However, not communicating about being overextended is definitely problematic to our businesses. So I do want to share with you a couple of warning signs to watch out for that may prompt you into not accusing, but into opening up an honest conversation about someone's capacity to do the work that you have brought them onto your team to do. So let's get into that. Number one, they may be late to multiple meetings, kind of sort of like without an excuse or with bogus excuses, right? You may catch them consistently looking at multiple screens during Zoom meetings, or being really distracted without the presence of, we're not talking personal distractions like children or fur babies or other loved ones. We're talking just like general distraction that we don't have an excuse for here. They may request payment for time that does not match up to the quality of work being done or the quantity of work being done. That perhaps is one of the most common things that I hear leaders complain about, which is, okay, well, they billed me for 20 hours, but they wrote one blog post that was, 2 pages. I'm very confused as to how this matches up, right? And last but not least, this one is kind of like up in the air, so take this one with a grain of salt, but they could be active on a platform like LinkedIn and they don't have your company listed. Oop. Or they don't want their face on your company's website as a team member, because perhaps it could indicate to others that they are on the team, and just like Fight Club, they don't want you to talk about it. That's the first rule of Fight Club, don't talk about it, because they know that they are on, too many teams are overextending themselves to a way that if each of the CEOs of these teams found out, they would have an issue with. So let's have a conversation around what undisclosed, quote unquote, overemployment can really do to your company and to your team. So the first thing here is pretty obvious. It's just that overall degradation of trust, right? I want you to think about your own team and what it looks like right now. Would you as a small business owner be comfortable paying for full-time, part-time, or even, 5 hours a week and not receiving that quality of work or that quantity of work? Probably not, right? Especially in the early years of business. That money is tight and we have it allocated out very intentionally. And so to feel as if someone may be taking advantage is a huge consequence, right? And that tends to be one of the first things where it's like, that pops up in business owners' minds when they find out that there is this undisclosed overwork happening. Now, what I just referred to, the buttoned up way to describe that is wage and time theft. If that is what's happening now, like I said, that was just the degradation of trust. And so that causes us to start to suspect a theft of wage and time. But if you're right about that, and if that's actually what's happening here, the second consequence is pretty obvious. It is an actual loss of money, right? The foundation of overemployment and of, accepting contracts that really should amount to 60, 70, 80 hours of work a week is to do just enough not to be fired while basically doubling the pay. Right? So obviously, this is not the person that's like working really hard to get it done and do it in, the shortest amount of time with still super quality work. We're talking about the people that want to get over on us, right? Like there is definitely a lack of integrity here. And knowing you and knowing the fact that you really, as a Typod community listener, I know that you prioritize hiring intentionally and bringing A players onto your team. So having someone in the mix that has this lack of integrity is not a good thing, right? So let's do some quick math here. Imagine you have 6 people on your team, and after taxes, I'm going to use easy numbers, not realistic numbers, but let's say after taxes are taken out, everyone gets $30,000 a year. However, 3 out of the 6 people on your team are not actually working full-time for you. They say they are, but they have 2 or 3 other gigs and they are splitting the time, not putting in the quality work, being distracted, showing up late, so on and so forth. So what is that costing you in money? Well, that's $30,000 a year times 3 people, which is $90,000. Divide that by 2. Because that's actually the amount of time that they are contributing to your company. That's 20 hours a week, not 40 hours a week. That's about $45,000 being lost per year, right? So this is not a good situation to be in. This is a situation that I don't think you're going to be in it because you're listening to this episode right now. I think that companies find themselves in this place when they just prioritize getting butts in seats and don't really take the time to ensure that they are hiring people who actually care about, making an impact, joining the company, furthering the mission and vision of your company, right? We do not want this to happen to you. And I know you don't, which is why you're listening to this episode right now. But money lost is a very real consequence of having, a team member sneak into the mix and start trying to game the system, basically. So with that whole game the system mentality in mind, let's move on to the third and final consequence of having someone on the team that is being double deceitful, like being super deceitful about what they're doing, what they're accomplishing for the company, where their time is going. Because the reality is, it doesn't just impact you or your company's bottom line, it impacts the team as a whole quite negatively. I want you to really think about what it would feel like as a team member within your company to find out that someone is making the same amount of money as you, doing half the work or half the quality of work, and being overly compensated because they are on someone else's team doing the same thing, like running the same game. That causes like this overall just degradation of the company culture, the team culture going on. They, especially, if it comes to light, that's when the gossip and the whispers and the pointing starts. And that is not a good situation to be in. It can become a major distraction on the team, obviously cause a little bit of jealousy here because if this goes unchecked, then it becomes a question of, well, why don't I do the same thing? You know what I mean? Like I also work from home. I could have, 2 different Slack channels open at the same time and try to toggle full-time employment on 2 different virtual teams at the same time. I could run the same game. Like it just introduces all of this not in integrity behavior and thinking into the team. That's just really unhealthy for everybody. So what do you think? Did you know that this was a trend that we were actually starting to see in the online workspace? Man, I mean, I'm telling you, I get it because it's quote unquote easy to do whenever you're not required to go into a building physically, and when, your boss can't walk behind your chair and see you working on something else. It's just so out of integrity and out of alignment with any type of company culture that my clients are building that it just blows my mind that this is something that's actually happening. But I had to bring it to you, had to discuss it with you just to make you aware, right? I always want to make you aware of what's going on, of what's good, what's bad, what to keep your eye out for. So I hope thinking about some of the very, very real consequences of not having that open, honest communication and truly prioritizing bringing the right people into your company in the first place can do, right? There are very, very real, tangible consequences to this stuff. So I hope that this episode was eye-opening for you. I truly hope that you listened to it and you were like, whew, that sounds a mess. So glad it's not me. What a great reminder, though. That's my hope for you. But if this is something that you've been through before and you're like, Tiana, ma'am, we need to talk about it, come DM me, come find me on LinkedIn or Instagram. Let's have a conversation. But all of you, thank you so much for listening in today. And I will see you, my friend, on the next episode of Typod.